Okay, imagine for a second that education is a massive garden. But for generations, it's been forced to grow only one type of plant, using the same tools in the same way all over the world. Well, we're starting to see that this industrial approach to learning, it might be failing our students. Exactly. And what's really exciting is that we're seeing communities reclaim their own educational ecosystems. You can see the whole idea right here. On one side, you've got the education factory. Standardized, one size fits all, kind of extractive. But on the other, you've got the education garden, which is all about diversity, cultivation, and being community grown. So today, that's the journey we're going to take. We'll start by looking at how that education factory got built. Then we'll get into how we can reclaim the garden. We'll cover the core pillars of how to do it, talk about the tricky role of technology, and then land on the biggest question of all. Whose garden is it anyway? All right, first things first, the education factory. How on earth did this standardized, almost industrial model become the default setting for schools all over the globe? Well, a huge piece of the puzzle is a concept called colonial amnesia. It's basically what happens when a curriculum just forgets, or maybe more accurately omits, all the non-Western histories and ways of knowing. It kind of creates this one big, single highway for history, making it seem like every other culture's path was just a minor side road. And this quote from Values 20, wow, it really nails that factory metaphor, doesn't it? The whole system is designed to be outcome-focused and fragmented. It's literally an assembly line. Kids move from the history station to the math station, and it's totally disconnected from a more holistic human way of learning. Which naturally leads to this really critical question. If one version of history is sold as the universal path, then what does that say about everyone else's knowledge? This gets at what some call epistemic injustice, basically the silencing of entire worldviews. It's the reason a student in Malaysia might know more about European kings than their own local stories of resistance. So how do we break out of that factory? Well, this next part is all about reclaiming the garden. And it's not just a small tweak, it's a completely different philosophy. We're talking about shifting from industrial production to careful local cultivation. And this is so important. Decolonizing education isn't just about swapping out one textbook for another. It's about fundamentally changing our relationship with knowledge itself. We have to get away from the idea that a teacher's job is to just download information into students' heads. The goal is to co-create knowledge with the students and their community. Okay, so how do we actually do that? How do we tend this new kind of educational garden? Well, the framework for it is built on 3 pillars that all have to work together. Right, these are the pillars. Number 1 is epistemic justice. That's about deciding which seeds, which kinds of knowledge are seen as valuable. Second is brave pedagogy, which is all about how we plant and nurture those seeds. And third, community governance, which really just asks, who holds the watering can? Who's in charge? So let's dig into that first one, epistemic justice. This is about taking indigenous and local knowledge and stop treating it like some quaint museum artifact you study. Instead, we see it for what it is, a living library, a valid, sophisticated system for understanding the world that can help us solve very modern problems. And here is a fantastic example of that. In the Salix language, their word for water, siwutqua, isn't just a label. The word itself carries an entire ethical worldview about the equality between humans and the rest of nature. It just goes to show you, language isn't just a communication tool. It's a container for deeply held values. Pillar number 2 is brave pedagogy. This is all about the classroom environment. So we've all heard of safe spaces, right? The idea is to guarantee comfort. But a brave space is different. It recognizes that real growth, especially when you're unlearning colonial ideas, can be pretty uncomfortable. It requires courage from everyone to lean into that discomfort. And a huge part of being brave is actually getting out of the classroom, out of the greenhouse, so to speak, and into the local ecosystem. Land-based learning says that the land isn't just a topic in a textbook. The land itself is a teacher. So the local environment, whether it's a forest or a river or even a city park, becomes the classroom. And that third pillar, community governance, gets back to that question of who's in charge. See, the old factory model was all about a north to south transfer. Solutions from the global north were just imposed everywhere else. The garden model, on the other hand, it thrives on south-south cooperation, where communities in similar situations can share knowledge that's actually relevant to their lives. Okay, but there's a really modern twist in our garden, technology, and especially AI. And the huge question here is whether tech is going to act like a pesticide, reinforcing that single crop model, or if it can be a pollinator, helping all that new diversity flourish. And the warning here is pretty serious. If our AI models are trained mostly on data from the global north and Western English, they could become these incredibly powerful new tools of colonial extraction. People are calling this techno-colonialism. It could actually make linguistic and cultural biases even worse and at a massive scale. But, and this is a big but, the opportunity is just as huge. On the flip side, if we're really intentional about it, AI could be an amazing tool for preserving and even reviving endangered languages. It could help create customized, culturally relevant learning materials and connect students with elders and knowledge keepers, no matter how far apart they are. To do that, though, we absolutely have to teach a new kind of skill in the garden: verification literacy. Students can't just be passive consumers of whatever AI spits out. They need the skills to audit, to critique, to question what these systems are producing. That's what empowers them to be the arbiters of their own truth. So let's bring all this down to earth. What does this big shift from the assembly line to a thriving ecosystem actually look like in a real school, in a real classroom? You can really see the difference right here. Instead of a literature class that only studies Shakespeare, you get local poets right alongside diverse global voices. Instead of these abstract lessons on a value like honesty, you use real-life stories from the students' own community that they actually recognize. Classrooms become plurilingual, and that rigid fixed curriculum opens up to give students choices co-created with their own elders. And all of these changes, all of these shifts, they all lead us back to that one final fundamental question that this whole transformation rests on. Yeah, let's be super clear about this. Decolonizing education isn't about rejecting everything that comes from the West. It's about rejecting the assumption that the Western way is the only universal way. It's about addition and complexity and local relevance, not just subtraction. In the end, it really all comes down to asking these three questions over and over again. Whose values are being taught here? Whose voice is being centered? And whose vision of the future are we cultivating? In a decolonized garden, the answer to all of those questions has to come from the community itself.